Word up, parents. Welcome to Keeping Shit real life chat for parents of neurodivergent children. I am your host, Jessie Townz. Let's get into this. So, this is my second ever episode. I'm so excited. I've got to say, I absolutely love recording and having a chat with everybody and just talking about the highs and lows of being a parent to a neurodivergent child. This week, what I really want to talk about is the silent grief. And I mean the silent grief that we carry as parents to neurodivergent children. And that can be, it doesn't always mean that, and I don't want to sound, it's not doom and gloom, but there is a massive silence that we carry as parents to neurodivergent children. If you've got a child who's neurodivergent, you've probably been there, seen that, got the t-shirt where you've tried to maybe do something. You've been invited by neurotypical parents, and actually, you just can't do it because your child's needs it doesn't allow you to be able to do it. I always think whenever we get a children's invite for my PDA, his twin brother, if it's like a trampoline park party, the reality is it's a great idea, but we just can't go a lot of the times because he just doesn't have the capacity to be able to be with neurotypical children. And that's really why I wanted to talk about this today, because it is really hard for us as parents. We miss the life that we thought we were going to have with our children. Our children miss the life that we wanted them to have. And it's really sad at times, but also it can be quite empowering once you get past the sadness of actually, well, not the sadness, once you get past the moment of reality that actually this is what family life is going to be like for us, then I think you become a lot more accepting of the situation and you can actually make amends with what you thought your life was going to look like. So the silent grief then that parents carry to children, to any neurodivergent children, whether they've got PDA, they've got autism, it is a really heavy weight that you carry. And I never forget somebody said to me, "Oh, can't you just make them go and do that?" Well, I can't, because if I do that, it's going to cause massive dysregulation. And I don't need that shit in my life. We don't need to be aggravating our children that are already in quite a lot of the time, really quite stressful situations. And when we're carrying that grief, the grief that we do carry is a lot of the time it's on us. And I don't think our children actually probably ever really know any different because they don't know any different because that's all they've ever known. But for us, we have got an older neurotypical son, as everybody probably knows. But one of the hardest things was, we had a parenting experience that was very normal, very straightforward, we could do things. There was the odd meltdown because obviously kids are kids and kids have meltdowns. But when our PDA and his twin brother came along, who both, they've both got ADHD, one of the things that I really struggled with is that it's a very silent grief when you've got a child that can't do neurotypical sort of activities, days out. And generally what happens, people really see a strong parent that's doing it all, and they see you coping with it. But what they don't understand is that we are in these situations where the reality is we can't go into busy places. We can't just make last minute decisions. There's so many other things, the moving parts that we have to contribute and think about before we actually make that decision of is this the right setting? Is this the right environment for my child? And that is a really lonely place to be sometimes. But I think when we start to learn how to manage it, and however you manage it, those tools that you have, I always try and, I'm going to admit this, I'm quite naughty and I don't give a shit. But if we need to go out to like Legoland or somewhere, I mean, the twins' birthday is coming up this Saturday. Now, their birthdays are Saturday, so we are going to risk it. But we are going to Legoland. We live very close to Legoland and Chessington and Thorpe Park. But what we generally do is we take our kids out of school for the day. I mean, who gives a shit if they've got a stomach bug or an alleged stomach bug? But for us, we can't go on busy days. It's very hectic. It's overwhelming. We see a lot of dysregulation. But I think when you start to take action and make a change into what actually normal life looks like for you, I think it's a lot easier to carry that grief. Some of the things I know, there are a lot of things that parents to neurotypical children, they don't ever really ever have to think about. Like, let's be honest, they haven't got a clue, have they? They just haven't got a clue until you tell them. But I still do feel that neurotypical parents, if they've had no experience of neurodivergent children, they can never really fully understand, the shoes that we're walking every day. And it can be really frustrating. Let's be honest. So many times people said to me, "Oh, can't you just do that?" And I think I probably could, but I don't want to do it because overwhelmed, dysregulated children that are neurodivergent ends up ricocheting to a fucking stressed out mum and dad trying to deal with it all. And listen, nobody's got time for that in their life. Like, we don't need that stress and that extra hassle. Our lives are very difficult and challenging sometimes on the worst days, let alone if we're having a good day. Why would we even want to run the risk of causing chaos when we know that we could have avoided it? Other things, that are on that sort of list that I just don't think people really think about of a grief that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis, having neurodivergent kids, is, being able to go to birthday parties, sitting around on a table, everybody singing, presents being passed out. That's a really overwhelming place for a child who's neurodivergent. And even though they may seem to enjoy it, the reality is, in that sort of social situation, you're highly likely to get a child who's then going to be masking. And as we all know, when you have a child that masks for a really long time, that mask ultimately comes off, slips off, and then all hell can break loose, or we can ultimately get some form of burnout. It's also like the other areas of grief that people don't really understand is this silence of some childhood milestones will probably never happen either. People are out celebrating their kids, moving up to secondary school, going with their friends, maybe going to prom if they're in secondary school. The reality is, our children, if they're in specialist schools, we don't have those milestones of, year 6 leavers discos or prom, because they physically might not be able to. But also, there's also that element that we don't know the parents. And that's another thing that I have also quite struggled with since my son started his specialist school, is the fact that I don't know any of the parents because I don't really know any of the children. And that's not no doing of my own, but he gets picked up in a taxi, he gets driven miles away. And we don't, even if I do go to pick him up from his school, the reality is I don't get to see the parents because they open the playground gates and all the cars just park there and the kids all come out and they get shunned off to the car that they are, going home in. So it's really difficult to try and relate to people when they don't have a neurodivergent child. Like, some of the challenges that we have regarding, hitting milestone points. And I always think my eldest son was so happy for his year 6 disco, and then COVID hit, and they actually did it the year after, when he was in year 7, because they wanted the children from year 6 to have a leavers disco. But and it kind of made me think a couple of months ago, and I was thinking about, the grief that we carry as parents to neurodivergent children, that the reality is Maxie's never going to have a year 6 disco. He's not going to be in that situation where the whole school's going to be having a party and everyone's going to say their goodbyes. And when he gets to secondary school, he won't have that, the signing of school shirts. It will be completely different because he is neurodivergent. And those sort of milestones it's incredibly sad when you think about it, that they just don't get this sort of stuff. And I also think the silent grief that we carry for, even being with family can be incredibly stressful when you've got neurodivergent kids. And that doesn't, I don't mean to sound harsh, but the reality is that having people in your house and in your space can be incredibly overwhelming for neurodivergent children. It's their safe space. This is where they love to be. And family parties, a lot of people, again, everybody asking them loads of questions, how they are, and they just don't have the capacity to be able to fit into that environment. And I always sort of laugh when people say, oh, but maybe you could make them do it. Maybe you can just make them, maybe they'll just be fine this time. But you know full well that your child's nervous system is probably never going to be fine and they're never going to be able to adapt to that situation. And I just think we carry a lot of weight, and I carry a lot of guilt that maybe my son is missing out on these occasions, these events, these parties, these childhood milestones. But actually, is he? I just don't know. A part of me thinks that he is, and a part of me says, like, just shut up, Jesse. He's not. He is more than happy with what he has and what he can enjoy now. And actually, if I were to sit and ask him, he wouldn't want to be at a busy party with a lot of children screaming, getting high on full fat Coke and sweets and this, that, and the other. But I think the silent grief that parents carry is way heavier than what the actual child itself probably knows or will never know what they are missing out on or what they're not missing out on. Because actually, really and truly, who wants to be at a kid's party with another 25 kids all losing their mind off their head on Tangfastic Haribos and drinking full fat Coke? Not on my watch. So I'm quite happy if I never go to a kid's party ever again, but that's just me. And I do feel that the grief sometimes is really, really heavy and it's unexplainable. I feel sad that for the life that I thought my child would have, I've obviously got a neurodivergent, neurotypical older son, and having two neurodivergent children, I just can't anticipate some days what their life is going to be like when they are not with me or when they're not with their dad, when they're not in the family home. And are they going to miss out on Christmas parties? Are they going to miss out on work dues? Are they going to miss out on going to university? Are they going to be able to leave home and have a structured, we all want the best for our children later on in life. Will they be able to, go to Freshers Week if they go to university? Can they survive without us? Are we always going to be their number one primary caregiver? Will they always be with us? Will they live with us for the rest of their life? And this is, I think sometimes when you let your mind run away with stuff, you can go on a fucking downward spiral very, very quickly. And I try and things that I do to try and make the grief not feel so bad. I just think that I'm here for a reason for them, and my child was given to me for a reason. And I think sometimes that's how you need to flip it on its head. The parenting journey that I thought I would have with the twins is very different to the parenting journey that I have had, that we have had, and we are going to have the rest of our lives. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on my Instagram or, within my paid community, but I was trying for a baby for a very, really, very, very long time. There is a 8.5 year age gap between my eldest and the twins. And I never thought that it was ever going to happen. I never thought I was going to have another baby. And lo and behold, my mum died. And I fell pregnant with the twins, literally about 5 months after she died. And they always say a life for a life, don't they? One life dies and another life is born. Well, I was blessed with two, but nobody else died, by the way. I just thought I'd tell you that. And I think I was just always thought, oh, I'm going to have three sons. I'll be honest with you. I am a boys girl. Like, I love being around company. Like, men are so much easier. They're chilled out. I was brought up with a lot of male cousins. And I don't know, I kind of had this like vision that my kids were all going to be like rock solid, really tight. But the reality is some days, like the twins, they completely fucking absolutely rile my elder son. And it's fair to say that sometimes he can't cope with them. So there can be a lot of shouting, why they've been in my room, why they're playing this. And to them, they think it's funny. But I think even my elder son, he struggles with he has a silent grief of what he thought it was going to be like having two brothers. I think he thought he'd be able to take them to the park, play football with them, play on the PlayStation with them. But the reality is, it's too much responsibility for him at 16. He can't take them to the park What if something happens? What if they run off? What if they get upset and he can't control them? That's not a fair situation for me to put my older son in. So he doesn't. And I can see some days he feels that, I think he feels he got the short end of the stick having neurodivergent twin brothers. But hey ho, we are learning slowly how to make his life easier, but also sort of appreciate the good days and what good looks like and what bad looks like. And that's another really important part of this episode of the pod is I wanted to, normal life is whatever you fucking make of it. And comparison is the absolute thief of joy. That is what I'm finding. And I feel like with social media, with other people, it's really easy to compare yourself to other people's other lives, other family setups, other routines. But actually, you just need to do what is the best for you and your family. And a lot of the time, it may not serve other family members. It might not serve your friends, might not serve your mum friends. And actually, that is absolutely fine for you to say, you know what, this isn't working for us. And this is what we're going to do. And I'm not backing down from it. And I think it's really, really empowering when you kind of make that decision and when you say it out loud and say, you know what, this isn't serving us. Like this isn't right for me and my family. So get out of here. I recently had not an incident, but my in-laws came down and they're in their 70s and it's just sometimes very hectic, and it's not derogatory to them, but I think autism and ASD looked very, very different in the 80s. We had a preconception of what that looked like, and I think there's maybe a little bit of naivety from them that he doesn't look autistic, which obviously we all know you can't just say if somebody looks or doesn't look autistic, but that's that's just their generation. And they came to visit us and it was all nice. But there were a few instances where, he hasn't said please and thank you. My PDA likes to sit on the same seat on the sofa every single day. Like, that is his seat. God help you if you sit there. Like, that is where he rolls. And my father-in-law sat down there and he was, obviously, my PDA was like, get out of my seat. And then he started to get really, really upset. And my father-in-law was like, well, I'm sitting here. That's really rude. And you just think, this is not kind of life this is not how I imagined life to be some days. It is absolutely adamant that he has to sit in that same seat, because if he doesn't, all hell's going to break loose and we're going to get stuff being thrown around, people being sworn at. And then ultimately it upsets people. But most importantly, it upsets my child. And my number one priority are my kids. End fucking of. If my husband's listening to this, you're quite far down on that list, babe. So sorry about that. But it's really empowering. And I did have to say to them, look, I'm really, really sorry. And I know this might be a very difficult situation for you to be in, but this is our house. And you kind of need to comply with the rules in our house. If we come to yours, that's absolutely fine. But when you're in our house, our safe space for our children, if you don't sort of follow our rules, then we can't really have you in the house anymore, because it's not fair that my children don't feel safe and secure in their own home. And it's like little things like that sort of grief where you think it's not until you're in the situation that you actually really, really sort of understand that parenting grief is a real thing. And I just find that it's not a weakness in any way, shape or form. By any means, it's not a weakness. But what it is, the grief is, it absolutely is a measure of how much you love your child. And I know that some people might think, oh, I don't see it, like you shouldn't be doing that. But other parents that are in the same situation as us and who walk the same path of us, they absolutely understand it 100%. And it's funny, when I talk to parents, that've got neurotypical children, they kind of just don't get it. Like, I feel like I'm repeating myself for this, but when you chat to a neurodivergent parent, straight away they completely understand and they totally are on board and they absolutely get the whole, feel like their child's missing out. But are we missing out, or is life just different for us? And that's what I want you to take away and have a think about. We're not missing out on anything. What we are missing out on is nothing. We're not missing out on anything, and our children are not missing out on anything. The silent grief that we carry as parents is a comparison of other people. And as I said, comparison is the absolute thief of joy. Well, that's it for today. Just wanted to really talk about that. But also, if you're not in the Shelf Help Townz Talks podcast, private Patreon, what are you doing with your life? I'll put the link in the show notes down below. But this month, I am reading the Understanding Pathological Demand Avoidance Syndrome in Children. I am nearly halfway through the book. I've done 2 podcasts already. And yeah, if you've got a child with PDA and you're just sort of starting off, this is a really great book. But for next month, I think I am going to, the Shelf Help Book Club is for all parents of neurodivergent children. And I'm not going to pick a book that can't be read by, can be read by a child, can be read by a parent of any children with neurodivergence. And I'm going to choose, I think the shortlist for next month is going to be between The Magic, which is a 28-day gratitude program. And we'll do it together every single day. And it's about really being grateful for what we've got now. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, it's really hard to get bogged down in life and the shite that comes with being a parent to a neurodivergent child, the paperwork, the constant battle for everything. And the Magic is such a powerful gratitude process. And I am not joking you. Every single time I do The Magic, something fucking wild happens. But yeah, I think it's going to be between The Magic, which is a really good self-development book for, you know, for everybody. And then between that and Dr. Ross Greene's The Explosive Child, which is a really prominent book in the ASD circle. And it's not just specific for PDA, it'd be children with autism, Asperger's. So yeah, it's £8 a month. It's going to save your life. We're going to have some fun. So click the show notes. And if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do at Mrs. Jessie Townz. That's it for today, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you next week.